Hey guys, welcome back to the Lifestyle School podcast, where we talk about complex health topics and make them practical so that you can create the lifestyle that works for you, so that you can have energy, confidence, and long-term success when it comes to your health goals. But before we dive in, as always, I want to give you a quick disclaimer, and then I'm going to give you a little personal update. But this podcast is for educational purposes only. I am not your doctor. I am not a doctor, and this is not medical advice. Always consult with your healthcare provider before making any major changes to your diet and lifestyle if that is important to you. So, I wanted to give you guys a quick update about where we're at. As if you've been listening to this podcast for any amount of time, I'm pregnant, and that just makes life a little bit different. And I'm not sure if you could tell on the last podcast on vitamins, but I was actually coming down with a really bad cold when I recorded that, and I felt absolutely awful. So I felt like it wasn't my best podcast performance ever. So I apologize. I always want to, show up here and give you guys my best. And I was giving you the best that I had in that moment. And then last week, which was Halloween, I did not drop an episode. And actually, that's the first week I haven't put an episode out since like the beginning of January of 2025. And honestly, it felt really weird. I had set this goal for myself that I would do one episode a week for a year. It's my goal. So it kind of felt like I not living up to the expectations I set for myself. But just like you, I am on this journey and I am learning to have more grace for myself and just realize that life happens. And we had some really fun stuff going on, but also I feel like we have been going at a sprint almost, or if not a sprint, a really fast run since the end of September. And it's just been super busy. And, I'm only one person and I don't have the energy levels that I did when I wasn't pregnant. And yeah, my brother and his family came. They have 7 kids and they were with us for the last week. And honestly, it was such a fun visit. It was so fun to see the relationships between the cousins hanging out. I have, 3 kids, they have 7, and the boy girl ages like match up really well. And so it's just fun to see that those relationships. And then, just getting to spend time with my brother and my sister-in-law. It was so special. We did so many fun things, saw the tide pools because it was king tide here in California. They saw the redwoods. I didn't go with them for that one. Because we had our homeschool group. But then we also, their kids got to see the ocean for the first time. So it was just so special, but it was really busy and a lot of planning and prep had to go into that visit. I made all the food ahead of time, which was a game changer for the visit. It made it so much more relaxing. If you could call, like a visit of that scale relaxing, but it just made it so much more doable. But with all that going on, I was just not able to prep the episode for last week, so it didn't happen. But, life goes on, and hopefully you guys went back and maybe listened to an old episode that you really enjoyed, or perused the old episodes because we're already on episode 44. Can you believe it? So there's lots of good content to go back and listen to, and sometimes repetition is nice. I don't know about you, but it's like if I find something that I'm like, oh, there's a lot of nuggets in this, I'll go back and listen to it multiple times because there's something about that repetition that helps things really stick in. And then, yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. But my life is significantly slowing down. My kids are wrapping up their soccer season. We don't have any more visitors coming into town. We're not traveling anymore. Until close to the very end of the year, we do have one more visit, but I say all of that to tell you my life is slowing down. So I would actually love to do, I know I said the opposite of this. I would love to do weekly podcast episodes through the end of the year. So we will see what happens. I'm going to keep that kind of a TBD, but yeah, I really enjoy creating this content for you guys. And I love hearing your feedback and hearing how it encourages you on your health journey. And honestly, it encourages me on my own health journey. And regarding my own health journey, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of like a pregnancy update because I know, maybe you're curious, but so I have officially passed the 30-week mark. And so when you enter your third trimester, they do, the glucose tolerance test. And so I opted to not take the drink with the 50 grams of sugar in it. And because last time I did it, one, it made me feel awful. But secondly, it's like I just know it's so bad for me. And so I asked my OB if I could do like daily, but like take my blood sugar daily. And so I opted to do that instead. If you follow me on Instagram, I did do like a little, maybe it was just a story about that. But long story short, my blood sugars did come back a little bit high. I don't know if it's because I was taking them directly after my morning workout, um, but I think they were even still a little bit high. And honestly, I could tell that my body was starting to become like I was retaining fluid in ways that I didn't feel comfortable with. And so I have since doing that cut out all carbohydrates except for vegetables. I'm not really hardly eating any fruit or trying not to. No sugar, no potatoes, no rice, no grains. Really just vegetables and meat and then healthy fats. And then I have started doing a little exercise routine every morning before I leave my bedroom because if you listen to this podcast for a while, I really do not like working out at home. I find it really hard to do consistently. But what I found is if I make myself do it before I leave my bedroom in the morning, I have like some TRX bands I put in the door. I have, some dumbbells at home. It's nothing fancy, but that has made a huge difference actually. And can tell, um, like swelling has gone down. I was noticing my rings were starting to feel a little tight. Everything is feeling a little bit better. Also, I've been having weekly chiropractic treatments, which, oh my goodness, have made such a difference as well. And then another thing that came up recently, so I had my blood work done at that like 28-week mark, and my iron was low. And actually, that was something my dad had mentioned, who's again, the functional medicine doctor that I worked with for 8 years prior to moving out here to California. But he was like, Hope, you should have your iron checked to see if, maybe that's part of the reason why you've been dragging so much. I just thought, I'm pregnant, I'm tired, that's normal. Come to find out, my iron was low. So I've been taking iron supplements, and I started that actually just before all of like the cutting out the carbs, more movement, and then taking an iron supplement. I started that before my brother came out. And you guys, let me tell you, I feel so much better. Also, I've been getting now regular chiropractic treatments. I feel so much better. I feel like, okay, I have, 10, 11, maybe 12 more weeks to go, depending, how over my due date I go. I'm due in January, and I never have gone early with any of my pregnancies. We'll see what happens. So with that, that's kind of where I'm at. If you ask me, how you doing? How you feeling? I think that's what people usually ask when I see them in person. And honestly, I just feel very pregnant. I'm just trying to focus on other things. And then it was actually funny. One of my nieces, she's 7. She asked me, so when are you going to start getting ready uh, for your baby? And I was like, do you mean ready to like have clothes ready and like have a bed ready? Or are you talking about like push this baby out ready? And she's like, push the baby out ready. I was like, I'll start thinking about that probably like 2 weeks before my due date. Until then, I am just trying to make the time go as fast as possible and ignore the uncomfortable parts of being pregnant. And, I'm definitely at that point where if I drop something, if there's someone standing by me, I will definitely be like, could you pick that up for me? Because it's hard. Okay. So that is my little personal update for you guys. That's where we're at. I will keep you posted about weekly podcast episodes. I would really like to do that, but there may be some weeks where it just doesn't happen. When we come to the new year, though, I will likely go to an every other week schedule, at least until I'm back from maternity leave. So with that, let's dive in to today's topic. Okay, let's start. Let me ask you a question. And it's this: have you ever thought about how your metabolism impacts your hormones? So most of the time, I think when people talk about metabolism, we're thinking calories in versus calories out, or maybe, blood sugar or insulin. And when people talk about hormones, they're usually thinking about things like testosterone in men, estrogen and progesterone in women, maybe thyroid or cortisol. But what if I told you that these two worlds are not separate at all? Okay, what if I told you that your metabolism is the foundation or the soil, and your sex hormones are the plants that grow out of that soil? If the soil is rich and balanced, the plants thrive. If the soil is depleted, toxic, or overgrown with weeds, the plants really struggle. And so that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to unpack how your metabolic health directly influences your sex hormones and why men with good metabolic health tend to express stronger masculinity while women with good metabolic health tend to express stronger femininity. And if you're struggling with low energy, low libido, irregular cycles, mood swings, or feeling like your body isn't working the way that it used to, this episode is going to hopefully connect some dots for you. So let's start by talking about our sex hormones. Let's lay the foundation. What are sex hormones and what do they do? Okay, so let's start with the men. So for men, the star of the show is testosterone. Testosterone gives men muscle mass, strength, drive, energy, motivation, and even that sense of competitiveness and confidence. But men don't just have testosterone, they also need a little bit of estrogen, which I think a lot of people don't usually think about, which comes from testosterone being converted. So, estrogen helps with bone density, brain function, and even heart health in men. But I want to be really clear, it's all about balance, right? Just like with anything else, too much estrogen, and men start to lose the very traits that make them masculine. And on the flip side, for women, the leading roles are estrogen and progesterone. So, estrogen gives women their curves, it nourishes skin, it supports their bone density, it regulates mood, and drives fertility. Progesterone is calming, it balances estrogen, it supports sleep, it prepares the uterus for pregnancy, and it helps regulate cycles. Without estrogen, or excuse me, without progesterone, estrogen takes over and symptoms like PMS, heavy periods, or anxiety show up. But just like men with estrogen, women also need testosterone in smaller amounts than men do for things like energy, libido, and for strength. So here's something that's often overlooked is both sexes have all of these hormones. Men have progesterone, women have testosterone, both have DHEA. The difference is the ratios. And hormonal health isn't about eliminating a hormone, it's about keeping them in balance, right? So here's the big takeaway. Your body has a design. Men are designed to be masculine, women are designed to be feminine, and hormones are how our body expresses that design. And now here's where metabolism comes in. Hormones don't operate in isolation. They're not free agents. They don't, they're more like musicians in a symphony. You've got things like violins, trumpets, you've got drums, but without a conductor, it's complete chaos. And in this instant, our metabolism is the conductor. So when your metabolism is working, when your cells are sensitive to insulin, when your mitochondria are making energy cleanly, um, when you eliminate inflammation or, inflammation is low, the conductor is in control and the music makes sense, right? Your hormones play in harmony with each other. But when your metabolism is broken or working improperly, when things like insulin are chronically high, if your blood sugar is unstable, if your inflammation is raging, if your oxidative stress is stealing resources, it's like the conductor is asleep or just gone, right? And the music goes off key, instruments compete with each other, and the whole symphony sounds absolutely awful, right? And when your hormones start working against and when this happens, it really are hormones rather than working for us. It starts to feel like they're working against us, and truly they kind of are. So let's talk some specifics. Excuse me. Still, this cough that I had 2 weeks ago is lingering. Um, so bear with me. So let's talk some specifics. How does high insulin actually interfere with hormone production? So let's start with the men. High insulin lowers something called SHGB, and that stands for sex hormone binding globulin. Think of SHGB like a delivery truck that carries hormones where they need to go. When SHGB drops, you've got traffic jams. Free hormones start piling up in the wrong places. For men, that usually means more free estrogen relative to testosterone. And insulin also cranks up aromatase. We've talked about this in some previous episodes, but aromatase is an enzyme found in fat tissue. And aromatase is the thief that takes testosterone and converts it into estrogen. And the more body fat you have, the more aromatase activity you've got. So the result is men lose testosterone and they gain estrogen, and that shows up as fatigue, loss of motivation, erectile dysfunction, belly fat, and sometimes even, I'm going to struggle to say this. Actually, I'm not even gonna try to say the word. It's like, well, I'll try. Gynomas. You guys, words are really hard to say in pregnancy. Gynecomastia, I think is how it's pronounced. And essentially, what it is breast tissue development. In other words, high insulin makes men less masculine, right? And in women, high insulin overstimulates the ovaries. So imagine shouting into a microphone that's already turned up full blast. The ovaries go into overdrive and start pumping out excess testosterone. And that's exactly what we see in things like PCOS, right? At the same time, insulin resistant makes it harder for women to produce enough progesterone. And without enough progesterone, estrogen takes over. And that's what we call estrogen dominance. And so the result is we have irregular cycles, we have a bunch of PMS symptoms, we have infertility, our mood is swinging all over the place, we have heavy bleeding, we have weight gain around, especially our midsection. Instead of feeling feminine and vibrant, women feel inflamed, they feel anxious and exhausted. So before we move on, though, I want to spend some time on something that I see all the time in women, and many women have never had someone explain this clearly to them, and that is estrogen dominance. So estrogen dominance doesn't necessarily mean you have too much estrogen, although sometimes you do. More often, it means you don't have enough progesterone to balance estrogen. Remember, estrogen and progesterone aren't enemies, they're dance partners. They're supposed to rise and fall in rhythm throughout your cycle. Estrogen builds and energizes us, and then progesterone soothes and stabilizes us on the back half of our 28-day cycle. Estrogen, you can think of it as the accelerator, and you can think of progesterone as the brake. And when estrogen climbs and progesterone is low, it's like the body has its foot on the gas pedal with no way to slow down. And here's the key connection. Progesterone is only produced when you ovulate. So no ovulation is going to equal no progesterone. So if insulin resistance is disrupting ovulation, which it often does, progesterone never gets a chance to come in and balance out estrogen. On top of that, the more fat cells we have, especially around our abdomen, the more aromatization we have. That means more estrogen is being produced inside the fat tissue itself. Because remember, aromatase is an enzyme. So now we have higher estrogen signaling, lower progesterone, and our blood sugar instability is driving inflammation. And this is the perfect storm for estrogen dominance. And this, isn't a subtle thing. Women feel this in their bodies, and common symptoms look like things like cycles that are heavy, painful, or a lot of like blood clots. You have PMS that feels like anxiety, rage, irritability, or emotional overwhelm. Breast tenderness or swelling before your period is another one. Bloating that comes and goes throughout your cycle. Midsection weight gain that feels impossible to lose. Headaches or migraines around your period. Sleep issues, especially waking up at around like 2 to 3 a.m. And then feeling wired but tired, like your nervous system can't settle down. My question for you is, does any of that sound familiar? Women often say, I feel like I'm living at the mercy of my hormones, or I'm taken out for a week or 2 weeks of every month between my PMS symptoms and then my period itself. And I don't even feel like myself. And, this is not a character flaw. It's not that you're emotionally weak, undisciplined, or dramatic. This is actually physiology, it's chemistry, it's metabolic signaling showing up in your experience of your own body. And when progesterone is low, women lose access to calm. Progesterone is deeply connected to things like our sleep, our mood stability, our stress resilience, and feeling grounded and safe in our own body. So, without enough progesterone, everything feels louder, right? Stress feels bigger, emotions feel more intense, and life feels just heavier, honestly. And this is why so many women feel like they're doing everything right, yet still feeling overwhelmed, maybe irritable, inflamed, or just very disconnected from themselves. It's actually not a will problem issue. It's our hormones responding to our metabolic environment. And, I want you to feel hopeful, right? The beautiful thing is that this is reversible. When we lower insulin and restore ovulation, progesterone comes back online. And when progesterone rises, estrogen finally has something to dance with again. And when women often describe that moment, of this happening, they're like, I feel like myself again. Um, Not a new version of themselves, not a fixed version of themselves, just themselves. And that's the power of hormonal balance rooted in metabolic health. And I can't tell you how many women I have worked with over and over and over again who, come to me because they want to lose weight, they want to have more energy. They can just tell things are off. And we start working on their metabolic health, and they're all of a sudden like, Hope, guess what? I had my period. I got my period, and I like didn't know it was coming almost because I didn't have the PMS symptoms. Or, usually I'm in bed the first 2 days of my period because my cramps are so bad. I don't have cramps anymore. And, honestly, this is even my own personal experience since high school. Like, I had to take over the counter medication because I was in so much pain. I've even thrown up before because I was in so much pain from my cycle. And then, you get these crazy cravings, you get the bloating, you feel irritable before your period arrives. And I mean, honestly, it's just a miserable existence, and it's half of your month, right? And once I started working on my metabolic health, I mean, my period would come and go, and it would not change really anything about my weeks or my days. Like, my flow was not super heavy. I didn't have any cramping, didn't have any mood swings or cravings. I wasn't bloated. Like, life just went on. And I think truly that is how we're meant to experience our menstrual cycles as women. And I think we've just been told that it's normal to feel awful for like 2 weeks of our month, which is literally half of our existence during our menstruating years, which is wild to me. So, if you are a woman listening to this, or if you're a man and you have women in your lives who you care about, like, we need to take this back. And we just like, this can't be okay. We can't accept this as the normal because we deserve better than this. And I think it's not talked about enough. And I don't have the time or the notes in front of me to go into this, but I also think we need to start thinking differently about our cycles and our periods. I think I've been talking with women about this recently, but I think we've come to see our periods as like a curse, of like the ovulation, like the 24, 28-day cycle. And, we've been told, well, just take, birth control and you can stop your period or go on this and this and that. But we are messing up this beautiful symphony of our hormones when we take hormonal birth control, or even, things like our IUD. We are changing this symphony that our body needs to go through. And there are ramifications for that. So whether it's medication induced, contraception induced, or, from a metabolic perspective, if our insulin is high and our blood sugar is dysregulated, and that's causing our symphony of hormones to be dysregulated, it all has effects now and also downstream. So I would just want to encourage you, like, let's start looking at our hormones as a blessing, especially as women, our cycle, our 28-day cycle as a blessing of like every month we get a period that should be a celebration of our body being healthy and doing what it's meant to do. Because if we aren't cycling and having that period, from menstruating for anywhere from 4 to 7 days a month, that is a sign of dysregulation and unhealth. So I'm just gonna get off my soapbox now and we'll keep moving. So now that we've talked about estrogen dominance in women, let's talk about something that affects both men and women, but in very different ways. And that's that process called aromatization, which we have been talking about. But aromatization is the biochemical process by where your body converts testosterone into estrogen using an enzyme called aromatase. So aromatase is not the enemy. We need some of this conversion, right? In women, it helps maintain healthy levels of estrogen. In men, it helps support brain health and bone health. But like everything in the body, it's about balance, right? And the problem is when aromatase becomes overactive. So aromatase lives in many places in the body, the ovaries, the testes, the brain, but the highest concentration of it is in our fat tissue, especially belly fat and breast tissue. So the more body fat we carry, particularly around the midsection, the more aromatase activity and production that we are going to have. And the more aromatase we have, the more testosterone gets converted into estrogen. And this is why aromatization is deeply tied to metabolic health, to insulin resistance, and inflammation. So for men, aromatization is a masculinity stealer, right? When testosterone is being converted to estrogen, muscle mass becomes really hard to gain. Fat begins to accumulate, especially in the belly and chest. Libido decreases, energy drops, mood becomes more anxious, irritable, or flat, and drive, competitiveness, and purpose start to feel blunted. Men often describe, this like, I know I should feel motivated. I want to care, but I just don't, right? That's what this would kind of be expressed as a feeling. And testosterone is the hormone of direction, of initiation, and momentum. So when testosterone is being siphoned away into estrogen, it's not just a physical shift, it's a shift in identity, and this is why men say, I don't feel like myself anymore. And in women, aromatization contributes to estrogen dominance, which we just talked about. So instead of progesterone and estrogen dancing together, estrogen begins leading the dance aggressively, right? And that shows up in things like heavy bleeding, mood swings, anxiety before the period, midsection weight gain, tender breasts, and then water retention and bloating. And again, women don't just feel that physically, they feel it emotionally. I would say it's described as, why do I feel so sensitive all of a sudden? Why do I feel overwhelmed by things that never used to bother me? Or why do I feel disconnected with my body? And, I think it's easy to think of these things as like emotional weakness, but it truly is not. This is metabolic and hormonal imbalance expressing itself through our nervous system. And aromatization doesn't just change hormone numbers, it really changes how we experience ourselves. And for men, too much aromatization quiets that drive, directions, purpose, clarity, strength, and presence that testosterone really supports in them. And for women, too much aromatization amplifies intensity, anxiety, overwhelm, and emotional reactivity. while blunting, her calm connection, our groundedness, and, just our general softness that progesterone supports. And this is why metabolic health is not just physical health. It impacts how we show up in our relationships, how we respond to stress, how we feel in our bodies, and how confidently we move through the world. Excuse me. So, here is the good news. Aromatization is not permanent. When we lower insulin, reduce inflammation, when we build muscle, when we reset our blood sugar signaling, aromatase activity decreases, which is a really good news, right? Men begin to hold on to their testosterone again. Women begin to balance estrogen with progesterone. And the feedback I hear over and over and over when this shift happened is, for men, it's like, I feel strong again. I feel clear in my head. I feel like I'm back in my body. For women, they feel more calm. They feel grounded. And, they also feel like themselves again. And this is the body coming home to its true design. So, now that we've talked about estrogen dominance and aromatization, this is where the picture becomes really beautiful and hopeful because when metabolic health improves, when insulin comes down and inflammation calms, when the body is no longer living in a state of metabolic emergency, the hormones begin to realign with the design of the body. And let's talk about what that looks like lived out. So for men, when men's insulin becomes balanced and aromatization slows, testosterone stabilizes and strengthens. And testosterone is not, just a muscle hormone. Testosterone affects our drive, direction, confidence, follow through, mental clarity, energy, sexual drive, and physical vitality. Testosterone allows a man to move towards his life instead of feeling like he's being dragged behind it. And when testosterone rises and estrogen comes back into balance, men often feel so much better. And this is masculinity in its healthy expression. They feel strong, grounded, steady, present, and purposeful. And when women have their insulin stabilized and their ovulation returns, when progesterone comes back online, progesterone is deeply connected to how a woman feels in her body. And it brings that calm, that safety, emotional steadiness, deep sleep, a sense of being centered, and that ability to soften instead of, brace. And an ability to respond instead of react. And when progesterone rises back into harmony with estrogen, femininity begins to express itself naturally without forcing it, without performing it, without trying to hold everything together with sheer will. Um, and, this is femininity in its healthy expression. It's soft, it's strong, it's intuitive, it's radiant, it's grounded, it's warm, right? And, I want to be clear. This isn't about gender stereotypes. I know people have all sorts of thoughts and feelings about that, but this is truly about like the design of our bodies. We're not talking about personality traits. We're not talking about cultural roles. We're not talking about stereotypes. We're talking about the innate hormonal blueprint of the human body. And when metabolic health is strong, men express testosterone easily, and women express progesterone and estrogen balance naturally. And when metabolic health breaks down, men lose the internal drive that testosterone supports, and women lose that grounded softness and emotional stability that progesterone supports. And this is why metabolic health is not just about blood sugar, it's about identity and it's about embodiment, truly. And, this is the part that moves me every time I walk through this with clients is, people are not trying to become someone different. They're trying to come home to, who they've always been, but lost touch with. And better metabolic health doesn't create a new version of you. It restores the truest version of you. Men who leads with steadiness and purpose, and a woman who lives with strength and softness, not overwhelm and urgency, right? We're not forcing hormones into balance. We're removing what is blocking the balance that was there all along. So, just a quick note that I want to touch on, because I think it's important. Of course, our sex hormones don't work alone. right? The human body is incredibly complex. I'm not trying to oversimplify this for you, but I do think hopefully I'm explaining this in a way that you can easily understand. There are other players in the mix. And so some of those honorable mentions would be cortisol. Chronic stress keeps our cortisol high. And when cortisol is high, your body literally steals resources away from sex hormone production. And it's called, I'm going to try to say this word, guys, pregnenolone. It's called the pregnenolone steal. Your body prioritizes survival over reproduction, right? And that's why getting our stress under control is super important for our cortisol regulation. Thyroid, poor is another big one. Poor metabolism often drags down our thyroid function, which slows everything else, our energy, our mood, our cycle regularity, and even libido. And then the last one I'll mention is leptin. Leptin is the hormone that tells your brain you have enough energy stored, but with insulin resistance and too much body fat, you become leptin resistant, and your brain stops listening. Reproduction takes a back seat. So those are some honorable mention hormones that also are in this mix, but I'm trying to keep this clear and simplified for you guys. But we could go much, much deeper on this topic. So now I want to transition to some practical strategies, right? Because that's the whole point of this podcast. So what do you do about it? Let's make this practical. First, you got to stabilize your insulin, cut out liquid sugars, you know, base your meals around protein, build your plates with real whole foods. Only eat the carbs that your body can truly utilize and handle based on your activity levels and your goals. Number two would be support your liver. So your liver clears out old hormones. This is really important. And things like too much alcohol, processed food, lots of processed sugar, really, essentially, to put it simply, clogs your liver's ability to clear those out. Number three is exercise, especially resistance training. Build muscle and burn fat. This not only improves insulin sensitivity, but it lowers aromatase activity. So go pick up some heavy weights. Number four, you're not going to be surprised by this one, guys. Prioritize sleep. So testosterone is highest in the morning, but only if you've had enough deep sleep. So it's really hard to have really healthy, balanced hormones if you're not sleeping. So we got to get our sleep under control. And then number five is reduce toxins. Things like plastics, pesticides, and chemicals mimic estrogen in the body. So do those simple things like switching to glass for your Tupperware, filter your water, clean up your skincare and cleaning products, and just try to reduce that toxic burden that your body has to deal with on a daily basis. These are just, good health habits. They're also hormonal habits, or not hormonal habits, I should say hormone habits. So I want to pause for a second and reflect. A lot has been talked about today. Do you feel like your body is expressing masculinity or femininity as it was designed? I just want you to take a second to think about that. Or do you feel off balance, like something isn't quite right? And this week here is a challenge for you. For the men, I want you to pick a habit that supports testosterone. Maybe that's lifting weights, going to bed before midnight, preferably before 10 p.m. Or maybe it's cutting out alcohol. For women, start tracking your cycle. Your cycle is one of the most powerful metabolic markers that you have. And then for everyone, I'd like you to choose one insulin lowering habit. So this could be cutting soda. Hopefully you're not drinking soda, but it could be cutting soda, going for a 10-minute walk after dinner, or making protein the focus of their first meal of the day. One small step is all it takes to start shifting your soil or metabolic health. So with that, guys, let's wrap it up. Metabolic health and sex hormones aren't separate. They're deeply connected. Good metabolism creates healthy soil, and healthy soil allows your hormones to thrive. So for men, that means stronger testosterone and more masculinity. For women, that means healthy cycles, balanced mood, fertility, and vibrant femininity. And if your hormones aren't where you want them to be, maybe it's not a hormone problem. Maybe it's a metabolism problem. And this is exactly what we work on inside my course in Lifestyle School for Weight Loss and in my 8-week personalized coaching program. We focus on the root causes of insulin resistance, blood sugar, dysregulation, inflammation, so that your body can function the way that it was designed. So if this episode resonated with you, I would be so honored if you'd share it with a friend. If you could leave me a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave me a comment, share it again with a friend, or 5 or 10. That's the best way to do that. You can head to my website and sign up for my email newsletter. I send out an email every week. I do link to this podcast episode if you want to have that delivered directly to your inbox. And you can follow me over at hopepackcoaching.com on Instagram. But with all that said, guys, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. And we'll see you next week on the Lifestyle School podcast.